I still remember the taste of the dust. That's the thing about Afghanistan that sticks with you. The dust. It gets everywhere. In your mouth, your eyes, under your fingernails, in the chamber of your weapon. Fine as talcum powder, but somehow gritty at the same time. I can still taste it sometimes, even now, years later. That's how I know I'm about to have one of the nightmares. I taste the dust first, then I'm back there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Staff Sergeant James Mercer. I served with the 10th Mountain Division, deployed to Wardak Province in 2010. This was my third tour. I'd done Iraq twice before, and I thought I knew what combat was. I thought I understood what it meant to stare death in the face. I was wrong. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, joined the Army right out of high school. Classic story, wanted to serve my country, wanted to see the world, wanted to make something of myself. My dad had served in Vietnam, my grandfather in Korea. It was in our blood. Basic training, then infantry school, then the real thing. Iraq showed me what war was, or so I thought. 2 tours, a few close calls, nothing I couldn't handle. I came home with a few medals, a few scars, and what the VA would later call mild PTSD. Nothing debilitating. Just enough to make me jump at loud noises and check my corners when I walked into a restaurant. By the time Afghanistan came around, I was a staff sergeant with a reputation for being level-headed under fire. They put me in charge of a squad, 11 men looking to me to bring them home in one piece. Some were veterans like me, others were on their first deployment, still green behind the ears with that mix of eagerness and terror in their eyes. Our fire base was a collection of concrete barriers, sandbags, and plywood structures nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. The locals called the area the place where devils dance. Cheerful, right? We were there to disrupt Taliban movement through the valley and build relationships with the local villages. Hearts and minds, they told us. Win the hearts and minds. The first few months were the usual mix of boredom and tension. Patrols through villages where children either ran up to beg for candy or threw rocks, depending on which way the wind was blowing that day. Old men with weathered faces who'd seen Russians, Taliban, Americans come and go, looking at us with eyes that had seen too much change to believe in any of it. Women glimpsed only as shadows behind doorways. We'd get shot at occasionally, usually just a few rounds from long distance before whoever it was disappeared into the mountains. We'd return fire, call it in, maybe get a flyover from a helicopter if command was feeling generous that day. Nothing serious. My squad was tight-knit. You live in each other's pockets out there, know each other better than family. There was Rodriguez, my team leader, who had a picture of his baby daughter he'd never met in person, taped to the stock of his rifle. Campbell, the joker, always ready with a smart remark to break the tension. Williams, the quiet one who wrote poetry he thought nobody knew about. Jensen, who carried a Bible everywhere and read it every night without fail. Martinez, who could spot a disturbed patch of dirt indicating an IED from 50 meters away. A skill that saved our lives more than once. Then there was Wilson, Michael Wilson. He was the newest addition to our squad on his first deployment. Kid from Iowa with a face that looked too young to shave and eyes that had seen too little of the world. He was nervous at first, jumpy, but eager to prove himself. I took him under my wing a bit. Reminded me of myself on my first tour. Sarge, he asked me one night as we stood watch together, the mountain's dark shadows against a star-filled sky. Do you think we're making a difference here? I took a long time to answer that one. I don't know, Wilson. I hope so. But sometimes I think this place has been at war for so long, it doesn't know how to be anything else. Then why are we here? He pressed. Because we were sent, I said. And because each of us hopes that maybe, just maybe, we can leave this place a little better than we found it. He seemed satisfied with that, or at least he pretended to be. April 15th, 2010. I'll never forget the date. We were scheduled for a routine patrol to a village about 5 clicks from our base. Intelligence had reported increased Taliban activity in the area, but nothing specific. Just the usual be alert. Warning we always got. The morning dawned clear and cool. Spring in Afghanistan is beautiful in its way. The mountains still capped with snow, the valley starting to green up. We geared up, checking and rechecking our weapons, comms, medical supplies. Standard procedure. I gathered the squad for a brief before we headed out. All right, listen up. We're visiting Ghanzi village today. Routine presence patrol, but intel says there might be increased activity in the area, so keep your eyes open. Rodriguez, you're on point. Martinez, I want you watching for IEDs. Campbell, you've got rear security. Standard formation, 5-meter spacing. Questions? There weren't any. We'd done this dozens of times before. We moved out just after 800, a line of heavily armed men making our way across the rocky terrain toward the village. The weight of my gear was familiar. Body armor, helmet, weapon, ammo, water, first aid kit, radio, about 60 pounds in total. You get used to it, the way it sits on your shoulders, the way it affects how you move. The morning passed without incident. We reached the village around 1000 hours. It was the usual scene. Mud brick compounds, narrow alleyways, the smell of cooking fires and livestock. Some children came out to see us, keeping a cautious distance. A few old men nodded respectfully as we passed. Our interpreter, Bashir, helped us speak with the village elder, a man named Farid with a white beard and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. We asked about Taliban activity, about needs the village might have. The usual questions. The Taliban, they come at night. Farid told us through Bashir. They take food, they take supplies. Sometimes they take young men for fighting. Have they threatened you? I asked. Farid gave me a look that made me feel young and naive. They do not need to threaten. We know what happens to villages that do not cooperate. We promised to increase patrols in the area, offered some medical supplies for their clinic. The usual assurances that probably meant little to people who had heard promises from foreigners for decades. As we prepared to leave, an old woman approached me. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her back bent with age. She reached out and took my hand, speaking rapidly in Pashto. She says you have the mark. Bashir translated, looking uncomfortable. The mark? What mark? I asked. The mark of one who has walked between worlds? The old woman said through Bashir. She says you will see the other side and return with truth. I didn't know what to make of that. In Afghanistan, you get used to cryptic statements, to superstitions and prophecies. I smiled politely, thanked her, and we moved on. But her words stayed with me, an itch at the back of my mind I couldn't scratch. We started our return journey around 1400. The day had warmed up, the sun beating down on us as we made our way back toward the base. The mood was relaxed as it ever gets in a war zone. Campbell was telling a story about his girlfriend back home. Something about a disastrous dinner with her parents. The others were laughing. That's when everything changed. The first shot came from nowhere, a single crack that echoed off the mountains. Martinez went down immediately, a spray of red from his neck. Before any of us could react, the air was filled with the sound of gunfire. Ambush! Take cover! I shouted, diving behind a rock outcropping. The rest of the squad scattered, finding what cover they could in the exposed terrain. I keyed my radio. Black Hawk 6, this is Echo 2-1. We are taking fire, multiple shooters, grid square Mike Alpha, 309457. One man down, requesting immediate support and medevac. The response was immediate but not reassuring. Echo 2-1, this is Black Hawk 6. Roger, you're last. QRF is spinning up. ETA 25 minutes. Hang tight. 25 minutes might as well have been 25 years. We were pinned down in open ground with at least one wounded man and no idea how many shooters we were facing. I risked a glance around my cover. Taliban fighters were moving through the rocks above us. I counted at least 15, maybe more. They had the high ground and had clearly planned this ambush carefully. Rodriguez, I called out. Can you see Martinez? Negative, Sarge. He's in the open. I can't get to him without getting hit. I looked to where Martinez had fallen. He wasn't moving. From the amount of blood I'd seen, I suspected he was already gone. But we don't leave our people behind, not even when they're dead. Jensen, can you put suppressing fire on that ridge? Campbell, Wilson, be ready to move when he does. Jensen opened up with his saw, the heavy machine gun rattling as he sent rounds toward the ridge where most of the fire was coming from. Campbell and Wilson used the opportunity to dash to a better position, closer to where Martinez lay. The firefight intensified. Bullets pinged off rocks around me, sending stone chips flying. The air filled with dust and the smell of gunpowder. I returned fire whenever I could get a clear shot, but the Taliban fighters were well concealed. Sarge, it was Wilson, his voice high with panic. I think they're trying to flank us. He was right. I could see movement to our right, fighters working their way around to get an angle on our position. If they succeeded, we'd be caught in a crossfire with nowhere to go. Williams, Rodriguez, shift fire right. Don't let them get around us. They acknowledged and redirected their fire. I heard a cry from the ridge, one hit at least. But for every fighter we took down, it seemed like two more appeared. Minutes stretched into eternity. The radio crackled with updates from base. QRF was en route. Air support was being scrambled. But we were on our own for now. Campbell made a dash toward Martinez, but took a round in the leg before he could reach him. He crawled back to cover, dragging his bloody leg behind him. Stay down, I shouted. Nobody else moves until we get support. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the Taliban fighters stood up on the ridge, hefting something on his shoulder. The unmistakable tube shape of an RPG. RPG! Take cover! The rocket streaked toward us, trailing smoke. Time seemed to slow down. I saw it hit the ground near Wilson and Jensen's position. The explosion was deafening, sending dirt and smoke high into the air. When the dust cleared, Wilson was down, not moving. Jensen was dragging himself away from the blast site, one arm hanging uselessly at his side. Things were going from bad to worse. We were down to half strength now, pinned down, with support still minutes away. I made a decision. Rodriguez, you're in charge. I'm going to try to reach Wilson and Martinez. Sarge, that's suicide. Just keep their heads down. I waited for a lull in the firing, then burst from cover, running in a zigzag pattern toward where Wilson lay. Bullets kicked up dust at my feet. I could hear the crack of rounds passing close to my head. But somehow I made it to Wilson. He was alive, but barely. The RPG had peppered him with shrapnel. His chest was a mess of blood and torn fabric. His eyes found mine, wide with fear and pain. Hang on, kid, I told him, pulling out my first aid kit. You're going to be fine. We both knew it was a lie. His injuries were too severe for field treatment. He needed a hospital, and he needed it an hour ago. Sarge, he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. I'm scared. I know, I said, working to apply pressure bandages to the worst of his wounds. But I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I keyed my radio again. Black Hawk 6, this is Echo 2-1. We need that medevac now. I've got multiple casualties. Echo 2-1, air support is 5 minutes out. QRF is 10 minutes behind them. Hold position. 5 minutes. I looked down at Wilson. His breathing was shallow, his face pale beneath the dust and blood. He might not have 5 minutes. That's when I heard Rodriguez shout a warning. Sarge, they're rushing us. I looked up to see several Taliban fighters moving down the slope toward our position, firing as they came. They'd sensed our weakness and were pressing the advantage. I had to get back to the others, but I couldn't leave Wilson exposed. I'm going to move you, I told him. It's going to hurt. I grabbed him by his body armor and started dragging him toward the nearest cover, a shallow depression in the ground that might provide some protection. He cried out in pain, but there was no help for it. We'd almost reached the depression when I felt the impact. At first, it was just pressure, like someone had punched me hard in the chest. Then came the pain, white-hot and all-consuming. I looked down to see a spreading dark stain on my body armor. The round had found a gap in the plates or penetrated the armor itself. I couldn't tell which, and it didn't really matter. I could feel the wetness spreading across my chest, the sudden weakness in my limbs. I managed to drag Wilson the rest of the way to cover before my legs gave out. I collapsed beside him, fumbling with my first aid kit. My fingers felt numb, clumsy. Sarge! Wilson's voice seemed to come from far away. You hit? It's nothing. I lied again, pressing a bandage to my own chest now. Just a scratch. The firefight continued around us, but it seemed distant, less important somehow. I was cold despite the Afghan sun beating down. That was bad. I knew that meant shock was setting in. I keyed my radio one last time. Black Hawk 6, this is Echo 2-1. Need immediate casualties. I'm not sure if I finished the transmission. The world was growing dim around the edges. I could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. Too late for me, I thought. Maybe not too late for the others. Wilson's hand found mine, gripping it weakly. Sarge ... I don't want to die here. You're not going to die, I told him, even as I felt my own life slipping away. Help is coming. You hear those choppers? They're coming for us. His eyes fixed on mine, desperate for reassurance. I gave it to him, even though I knew the truth. His grip on my hand loosened. His eyes stared up at the Afghan sky, no longer seeing. Wilson? I shook him gently. Nothing. Wilson. He was gone, and I wasn't far behind him. The pain was fading now, replaced by a strange numbness that spread from my chest outward. My thoughts were becoming jumbled, disconnected. I thought of my family back home, of all the things I'd never said, all the things I'd never done. I thought of Wilson's family, who would get the news in the coming days that their son wouldn't be coming home. The sound of the firefight seemed to fade, replaced by a strange rushing noise like wind through leaves. The bright Afghan day grew darker, shadows creeping in from all sides. My last conscious thought was the realization that the old woman in the village had been right. I was about to see the other side. Then darkness took me. I don't know how to describe what happened next. Words seem inadequate. Like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind from birth. But I'll try. First, there was nothing. No pain, no awareness, no thought. Just absence. Then gradually a sense of self returned. But it was different. I didn't have a body, yet I was somehow more present, more aware than I'd ever been before. I was floating in darkness, but it wasn't frightening. It was peaceful, comforting, like being wrapped in a warm blanket. I felt safe for the first time in longer than I could remember. Then I became aware of a light. Not bright or harsh, but soft, inviting. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I was drawn to it, not moving in a physical sense, but my awareness shifting toward it. As I approached, the light grew stronger, and with it came a sense of overwhelming love and acceptance. It's difficult to put into words the profound feeling of being completely known, completely understood, and completely loved despite all my flaws and failings. Within the light, I began to perceive shapes, forms that seemed to coalesce and dissipate. And then, to my astonishment, I recognized one of them, Martinez. He stood before me, but not as I'd last seen him, with his throat torn open by a Taliban bullet. He was whole, perfect, his face younger and unburdened by the stress of war. He smiled at me, a smile of pure joy. "Sarge," he said, though not with words as I understood them. It was more like his thoughts reached directly into my consciousness. "You made it. Martinez? But you're—" I couldn't finish the thought. "Dead." He laughed, and the sound was like music. "So are you at the moment. But it's not so bad, is it?" I realized he was right. I felt no fear, no regret, just a profound peace and curiosity. "Where are we?" I asked. "The in-between," he replied. "Not your final destination. Think of it as a way station." Other figures began to appear around us. Wilson was there, looking whole and at peace. But there were others too, faces I recognized with shock. Jackson from my first tour in Iraq, who'd stepped on an IED. Ramirez, who'd bled out in my arms after a firefight in Fallujah. Faces from a past I'd tried to forget. Men I'd led who hadn't come home. "We've been waiting for you, Sarge," Jackson said, stepping forward. "Though you're not staying long." "I don't understand," I said. "You will," replied Ramirez. "There's someone who wants to speak with you." The gathering of soldiers parted, and a new figure approached. As it drew closer, the light seemed to intensify around it, making it difficult to perceive clearly. But I could feel an overwhelming presence, ancient and knowing yet somehow familiar. James Mercer. The presence communicated, again not in words but in pure thought and emotion. "Your time here is brief. You must return." "Return? Why?" "It's peaceful here. I'm tired of fighting." A wave of understanding and compassion washed over me. "Your journey is not complete. You have a purpose still to fulfill." "What purpose?" I asked. "To bear witness," came the reply. "To tell what you have seen. To remind those still living of what truly matters." Before I could ask more, images began to flow through my consciousness. I saw my life, not just as I had experienced it, but from every perspective. How my actions had affected others, the ripples of both kindness and carelessness spreading outward. I saw moments of courage and moments of cowardice, times of selflessness and times of pettiness. But it wasn't judgmental. Each memory was shown with complete understanding of the circumstances, the pressures, the limitations of being human. And through it all, a sense that every life, every choice, every moment mattered in ways I couldn't have imagined. The presence drew closer. I still couldn't perceive its exact form, but I felt an overwhelming sense of recognition, as if meeting someone I'd always known, but somehow forgotten. "You have questions," it communicated. "So many," I replied. "Owen, why is there so much suffering? What's the point of all the pain, the wars, the loss?" "Those are human questions," came the response, tinged with something like sadness. "From where you stand, you see only fragments of the pattern, but every life, every death, every joy and sorrow is a thread in a tapestry beyond your comprehension." That's not very satisfying, I thought, and felt something like amusement in return. No, it isn't. But it is true. What I can tell you is that love is the only thing that truly matters. Not power, not possessions, not even principles. Only how you have loved and allowed yourself to be loved. The soldiers around me nodded in agreement, as if this was a truth they had all come to understand. "The men I lost," I said, looking at their faces. "Was it my fault? Could I have saved them?" Martinez stepped forward. "Sarge, we never blamed you. Not once. You did everything you could," added Wilson. "Sometimes everything isn't enough. That's war. But why? I pressed. Why do we keep fighting these wars? What's it all for? The present seemed to pulse with emotion. Human choices, free will. The consequences of both echo across generations. But even in darkness, there is purpose to be found. You found yours in protecting your brothers. They found theirs in standing beside you. I thought of the battles I'd fought, the men I'd killed, the friends I'd lost. It all seemed so pointless from this perspective, yet also somehow necessary, part of a process I couldn't fully grasp. I'm tired, I admitted. So tired of fighting. Then don't return to fight, said the presence. Return to heal. Return to speak truth. Return to love. The soldiers around me began to fade, their forms becoming transparent as they merged back into the light. Only Wilson remained distinct. Sarge, he said, his young face solemn. Tell my mom I'm okay. Tell her I don't hurt anymore. I will. I promised. And Sarge? It wasn't your fault. None of it was. He too began to fade into the light. Wait, I called out. Will I remember any of this? Not all, came the response from the presence. The human mind cannot contain the fullness of this experience. But you will remember enough. Enough to share what matters. The light was changing now, pulsing, contracting. I felt myself being drawn away from it, back towards something heavy and painful. It's not your time. The presence communicated one last time. Go back. Bear witness. Remember, love. The light receded and darkness closed in again. But now the darkness felt confining, restrictive. I was suddenly aware of pain, intense, throbbing pain in my chest. The peaceful weightlessness was replaced by the heavy sensation of my body, of tubes and wires and bandages. I heard beeping, the steady electronic rhythm of medical equipment. Voices urgent but professional. The antiseptic smell of a hospital. BP's rising. Heart rate stabilizing. I think he's coming back. Staff Sergeant? Staff Sergeant Mercer? Can you hear me? I tried to open my eyes. The light was harsh, artificial. Nothing like the gentle radiance I'd just left behind. I wanted to go back to that peaceful place, to the light, to my friends who waited there. But something held me here. A promise. A purpose. With enormous effort, I opened my eyes fully. A doctor's face hovered above me, looking relieved and surprised. Welcome back, Staff Sergeant, he said. You gave us quite a scare. I tried to speak, but there was a tube in my throat. The doctor saw my confusion. You're at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. You were critical when they brought you in. Took a round to the chest that nicked your pulmonary artery. You've been unconscious for 3 days. We nearly lost you several times. Nearly lost me. If he only knew how far I'd gone. Your squad is still in Afghanistan, but they've been updated on your condition. 4 casualties total. 2 KIA, Martinez and Wilson. You and Campbell made it out. The quick reaction force arrived just in time. Air support turned the tide. Martinez and Wilson. I remembered seeing them in the light, whole and at peace. Was that real or just my dying brain creating comfort for itself? Try not to talk, the doctor continued. That tube will come out soon if your numbers stay good. Just rest for now. Rest. That sounded good. My eyelids felt heavy again. But before I drifted off, I had a moment of perfect clarity. I remembered the presence in the light, the message it had conveyed. Bear witness. Remember, love. I had a purpose now. A message to deliver. If I could just remember it clearly enough when I fully woke. As consciousness faded again, I wasn't falling into darkness this time, but into a peaceful, healing sleep. And somewhere just at the edge of perception, I could still feel the gentle radiance of the light waiting. I had died in a Taliban firefight in Afghanistan, and I had come back with a message. I woke up properly 3 days later. The tube was gone from my throat, replaced by an oxygen cannula in my nose. The pain in my chest was duller now, managed by whatever was dripping into my arm from an IV bag. My mouth was dry, my throat raw from the intubation. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over to check my vitals. She was American, her nameplate reading Captain Reynolds. Good to see those eyes open, Staff Sergeant, she said, adjusting something on one of the monitors. How's the pain? Scale of 1 to 10? 6, I croaked. Water? She helped me take a few sips through a straw. Even that small effort left me exhausted. The doctor will be in soon to talk to you, she said. You've had a lot of people worried. I nodded, not trusting my voice for more words. As she left, I took stock of my situation. Hospital bed, private room. Various tubes and wires connecting me to beeping machines. A window showing a gray German sky. Military hospital in Landstuhl. the way station for wounded troops before they're stable enough to be sent back to the States. My chest felt like it had been split open with an axe, then inexpertly stitched back together, which I supposed wasn't far from the truth. I vaguely remembered the doctor saying something about a bullet in my pulmonary artery. But it was the other memories, the ones from when I was technically dead, that occupied my thoughts. The light, the peace, Martinez and Wilson and the others, the presence that had spoken to me. It all seemed both incredibly vivid and frustratingly vague, like a dream you can't quite hold on to after waking. Bear witness. Remember, love. The words echoed in my mind. What exactly was I supposed to bear witness to? What message was I meant to carry? Before I could puzzle it out further, a doctor entered, a middle-aged man with graying hair and the oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel on his uniform. Staff Sergeant Mercer, he said, picking up my chart. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Harmon. I've been overseeing your care since you arrived. Do you remember our conversation from a few days ago? I shook my head. That's not unusual. You were only partially conscious. Well, let me bring you up to speed. You took a round to the chest during a firefight in Wardak Province. The bullet penetrated your body armor and nicked your pulmonary artery, one of the major blood vessels leading from your heart to your lungs. You lost a tremendous amount of blood before the medevac got to you. He paused, looking at me over his glasses. Staff Sergeant, by all medical standards, you were dead for approximately 4 minutes before the combat medics were able to resuscitate you. Once stabilized, you were evacuated to Bagram, then airlifted here. We performed emergency surgery to repair the artery and remove bullet fragments. You've been in and out of consciousness for about 6 days total. 4 minutes. It had felt both much shorter and infinitely longer. My squad? I managed to ask. His expression grew more solemn. I believe you already know about Martinez and Wilson. They didn't make it. Campbell is recovering from a leg wound at Bagram. He'll be transferred here in a few days. The rest of your squad is still in country, though I understand they've been moved to a different area of operations. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of grief, guilt, and relief. Martinez and Wilson were dead, but I'd seen them. They were at peace. At least I thought I had. Now in the harsh light of the hospital room, surrounded by medical equipment and the smell of antiseptic, the experience seemed less certain. Had it really happened, or was it just the hallucination of a dying brain starved of oxygen? When can I go home? I asked. Not for a while yet. Doctor, Harmon replied. The damage was extensive. You'll need several more surgeries than physical therapy. I'd estimate at least a month here before you're stable enough for transfer to Walter Reed. Then several more months of recovery there. The news should have disappointed me, but I felt oddly detached from it. What was physical recovery compared to what I'd experienced? My body seemed less important somehow, just a temporary housing for something more significant. There's something else, I said. Well, it does hurt dead. I experienced something. Doctor, that's sure. Harmon's expression didn't change. Many patients who undergo cardiac arrest report unusual experiences. It's quite common, actually. This wasn't just unusual. I insisted, my voice stronger now. I saw a light. I felt peace. I met people, soldiers who had died. We communicated. There was a presence. It told me I had to come back, that I had a message to deliver. Now his expression shifted to one of careful neutrality. Staff Sergeant, your brain was deprived of oxygen for several minutes. Such experiences, while subjectively very powerful, are generally understood to be the result of neurochemical processes during cardiac arrest. I wanted to argue, to tell him how real it had been, how it hadn't felt like a hallucination or a dream, but I could see it would be pointless. He'd already categorized my experience, filed it away as a textbook case of a dying brain creating comforting illusions. Get some rest, he said, making a note in my chart. Your recovery is our priority right now. Everything else can wait. After he left, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile what I knew I had experienced with the clinical explanation I'd just been given. The more I thought about it, the more details came back to me. The weightlessness, the all-encompassing love, the faces of my fallen comrades relieved of pain and fear, and the message. Bear witness. Remember, love, I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the light in the room had changed. Evening shadows stretched across the floor. There was someone sitting in the chair beside my bed, a chaplain, judging by the cross on his uniform. Good evening, Staff Sergeant, he said, noticing I was awake. I'm Captain Lewis, one of the chaplains here. I hope I'm not intruding. I like to check in on all our patients, especially those who've had close calls. Not intruding, I managed. My voice was a little stronger now. How are you feeling? And I don't mean physically, the doctors have that covered. I considered the question. Confused. Uncertain. He nodded as if that was exactly what he'd expected to hear. I've sat with many soldiers who've come close to death. It often leaves them with questions that medicine can't answer. Something about his manner, the lack of judgment in his eyes, made me decide to take a chance. I died, I said. I was clinically dead for 4 minutes. And I experienced something during that time. Instead of giving me the same patronizing look the doctor had, Chaplain Lewis leaned forward slightly, his expression open and interested. Would you like to tell me about it? So I did. I described the darkness, then the light. The feeling of peace and love, meeting Martinez and Wilson and the others. The presence that had spoken to me told me I had to return to bear witness. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What you're describing is consistent with what many people report after near-death experiences. The light, the feeling of peace, meeting deceased loved ones. These elements appear across cultures, religions, and backgrounds." The doctor said it was just my brain shutting down. I said, "Hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen." The chaplain smiled slightly. That's one explanation, certainly. The medical establishment tends to prefer explanations that fit within its understanding of the physical world. But there are other possibilities. Like what? Like the possibility that what you experienced was real. That consciousness isn't limited to brain function. That there is something beyond this physical existence. He paused. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, Staff Sergeant. Your experience was yours alone. What matters is what meaning you find in it. The presence told me I had to bear witness. I said, that I had a message to deliver. But I'm not sure what that message is. Perhaps that will become clearer with time, he suggested. Or perhaps the act of sharing your experience, of bearing witness to what you saw and felt, is itself the message. We talked for a while longer. He didn't try to convert me or fit my experience into any particular religious framework. He just listened, occasionally offering thoughts or perspectives that helped me process what had happened. Before leaving, he gave me a book, a collection of near-death experience accounts from people of various backgrounds. You're not alone in this, he said. Many have walked this path before you. Their stories might help you make sense of your own. Over the next few days, as my physical strength slowly returned, I read the book. The similarities between my experience and those described in its pages were striking. The light, the peace, the love, the life review, these elements appeared again and again across different accounts. It was comforting to know others had experienced similar things, yet frustrating because none of them seemed to fully capture what I had felt, what I had known in those moments beyond death. Words were inadequate containers for such profound experiences. A week after our first conversation, Chaplain Lewis returned. He found me sitting up in bed, attempting to eat what the hospital called lunch. You're looking better, he observed, taking the chair next to my bed. Feeling better too, I said. Still weak as a kitten, but the doctors say I'm making good progress. I'm glad to hear it. He nodded toward the book on my bedside table. Has that been helpful? Yes and no, I admitted. It's good to know I'm not crazy, that others have experienced similar things. But it also makes me more certain that what I experienced was real, which puts me at odds with most of the medical staff here. That tension is something many NDEers have to live with. He said, using the shorthand term for people who've had near-death experiences. Our culture doesn't have a good framework for integrating these experiences. There's something else, I said hesitantly. Something I haven't told anyone yet. He waited patiently. Wilson, one of the men who died in the ambush, he asked me to tell his mother something specific. He said to tell her that he's okay, that he doesn't hurt anymore. And you're wondering if you should? I nodded. What if it just makes her grief worse? What if she thinks I'm crazy or lying to make her feel better? I don't even know how I would contact her. These are valid concerns, the chaplain acknowledged. But consider this. If your experience was real, you're carrying a message that could bring profound comfort to a grieving mother. Is that not worth the risk of being misunderstood? Put that way, the answer seemed obvious. Yes, it is. As for how to contact her, the Army has programs for connecting wounded soldiers with the families of those who didn't make it. I could make some inquiries if you'd like. I would. Thank you. Our conversation shifted to other topics. My recovery, news from Afghanistan, my plans for the future. It was only as he was leaving that he paused and asked, have you had any unusual experiences since waking up? Sometimes NDEs are accompanied by after effects. I hesitated, then admitted, I've been having dreams, vivid ones. Sometimes I'm back in the light, talking with the presence. Other times I'm watching scenes from my life, but from outside myself, seeing things I never noticed before. He nodded as if this was expected. That's common. Many NDers report increased intuition, vivid dreams, even what some might call psychic experiences. Pay attention to them. They may be part of the message you're meant to share. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Campbell was wheeled into my room, his leg elevated and heavily bandaged. He looked thinner than I remembered, his normally jovial face drawn with pain and grief. But he broke into a grin when he saw me. "Sarge, damn, you look like hell. Speak for yourself." I replied, genuinely happy to see him alive. "How's the leg?" "Shattered in 3 places. Got a bunch of metal pins in it now. Doc says I'll walk again, might even run eventually, but my dancing days are over." His smile faded. "They told me you died, Sarge. Like actually died before they brought you back." "Yeah," I said, "for about 4 minutes, apparently." He wheeled himself closer to my bed, lowering his voice. "Is it true what they say? Did you see the light or anything like that?" I hesitated. Campbell had always been the practical joker of the squad, quick with a sarcastic comment. But the look in his eyes now was serious, almost desperate. "Yes," I said simply. "I did." He let out a long breath. "What was it like?" Did you see them? Martinez and Wilson?" "I saw them," I confirmed. "They were at peace, Campbell. No pain, no fear. They wanted me to know they don't blame any of us for what happened." His eyes filled with tears. "You're not just saying that? Because I keep thinking, if I'd been faster, if I'd gotten to Martinez when he first went down, it wouldn't have made a difference," I said with certainty. "And no, I'm not just saying it. I saw them. I talked with them. They're okay." He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "I've been having nightmares, seeing their faces, hearing the firefight over and over." "Me too," I admitted. "But there are other dreams too. Good ones. About the light." We talked for hours, going over every detail of the ambush, filling in each other's blanks about what had happened. The Taliban force had been larger than intelligence estimated, closer to 30 fighters than the 15 I'd initially counted. The quick reaction force had arrived just in time to save the rest of the squad, with air support driving the remaining Taliban back into the mountains. "Rodriguez got a Silver Star," Campbell told me. "After you went down, he organized the defense, kept everyone together until QRF arrived. Williams got hit too, but he'll make it. Jensen's already back with the unit." I felt a surge of pride. My men had held it together in the worst circumstances possible. "And you? What are you getting?" I asked. Campbell looked uncomfortable. "They're putting me in for a Bronze Star. But it should be you, Sarge. You're the one who tried to save Wilson and got myself killed in the process," I pointed out. "Not exactly medal-worthy." "The hell it isn't," he insisted. "You died trying to save one of your men. That's the definition of above and beyond." I shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at my chest wound. "Doesn't matter. I'm just glad you made it out." Before Campbell left, he hesitated, then said, "Sarge, what you said about Martinez and Wilson being at peace, I want to believe that. I really do. But how can you be sure it wasn't just, your brain doing weird stuff because you were dying?" It was a fair question, one I'd been wrestling with myself. "I can't prove it, Campbell. All I can tell you is that it didn't feel like a hallucination or a dream. It felt more real than this conversation we're having right now. And the things I learned, the way I felt, it changed me. I'm not the same person who went into that firefight." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "That's good enough for me. If you say they're at peace, then they're at peace." The next few weeks passed in a blur of surgeries, physical therapy sessions, and pain management. My body was healing, slowly but steadily. The doctors seemed pleased with my progress, though they warned me I might never regain my full strength or stamina. Throughout this time, my memories of the near-death experience remained vivid. If anything, they seemed to grow clearer rather than fading as dreams normally do. I could recall with perfect detail the faces of Martinez and Wilson, the sensation of boundless love, the words of the presence. "Bear witness. Remember, love." I began keeping a journal, recording everything I could remember about the experience and the insights that continued to come through dreams and quiet moments of reflection. The act of writing helped me process what had happened, made it more concrete. Chaplain Lewis visited regularly, bringing books and articles about near-death experiences. We had long discussions about spirituality, consciousness, and the nature of reality. He never pushed any particular interpretation, but helped me find my own way through the philosophical and existential questions my experience had raised. One morning, about a month after I'd arrived at Landstuhl, he came with a different kind of news. "I've been in touch with the casualty assistance officer assigned to the Wilson family," he said. "Mrs. Wilson will be visiting Germany next week. Her son's body is being transported back to the States, and the Army arranged for her to stop here first. She's asked to meet with survivors from her son's unit." My heart raced. This was both what I'd hoped for and what I'd feared. The chance to deliver Wilson's message to his mother, but also the risk of causing her more pain if she didn't believe me. "What should I tell her?" I asked. "The whole truth about what I experienced?" Chaplain Lewis considered this. "That depends on your read of the situation when you meet her. Some family members find great comfort in NDE accounts that mention their loved ones. Others aren't ready to hear it. Trust your instincts. And remember, you can share the message without necessarily sharing all the details of how you received it." The day I was to meet Mrs. Wilson, I was a bundle of nerves. I'd been moved to a rehabilitation ward by then and was able to get around with a walker. The chaplain had arranged for us to use a private meeting room, more comfortable than my hospital room. When she entered, I instantly recognized Wilson in her features. The same earnest eyes, the same slight build. She was in her 50s, her brown hair streaked with gray, her face lined with grief but holding it together with obvious effort. I struggled to stand as she approached, but she waved me back down. "Please, don't get up," she said. "You must be Sergeant Mercer. Michael mentioned you in his letters. He said you looked out for him." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. "I tried, ma'am. I'm so sorry I couldn't save him." She took the seat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "The officers who came to my door said you were trying to reach him when you were shot, that you nearly died yourself trying to save my son. I wanted to thank you for that. Your son was a good soldier, Mrs. Wilson, and a good man. Everyone in the squad respected him." She nodded, a small sad smile touching her lips. "He was so proud to serve. Ever since he was a little boy, he wanted to be a soldier." Her voice caught. "I just never thought, you never really believe it will be your child who doesn't come home?" We talked for a while about Wilson, his life before the Army, his training, his time in Afghanistan. I told her stories that showed his courage, his dedication, his quiet sense of humor. She drank them in, clearly hungry for any details about her son's final months. Eventually, there was a natural pause in the conversation. It was now or never. "Mrs. Wilson," I said carefully, "there's something else I need to tell you. Something about the day Michael died." She tensed slightly, preparing herself for something painful. "When I was shot trying to reach Michael, my heart stopped. I was clinically dead for about 4 minutes before the medics resuscitated me." "Oh my God," she breathed. "I didn't know it was that serious." During that time, I continued, choosing my words with care. I had what doctors call a near-death experience. I was somewhere else. And Michael was there. Her eyes widened. I couldn't tell if it was with hope or horror. "He was at peace," I hurried on. "No pain, no fear. And he asked me to tell you something. He said to tell you that he's okay, that he doesn't hurt anymore." For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then, to my surprise, she reached across and took my hand, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you for telling me that. You ... Believe me?" I asked, not bothering to hide my surprise. She nodded. "Michael's grandmother, my mother, she had a similar experience years ago after a heart attack. She saw the light, felt the peace, met deceased relatives. When she recovered, she was changed. She'd always been a fearful woman, worried about everything. After her experience, she was at peace. She knew death wasn't the end." I felt a wave of relief. "That's exactly it. It changes you, changes how you see everything." "Did he say anything else?" she asked, her voice eager now. I told her everything I could remember about seeing Wilson in the light, his appearance, his demeanor, the sense of peace and acceptance that surrounded him. I described how the others were there too, how none of them blamed me or anyone else for what had happened. "It wasn't like dreaming," I explained. "It was clearer, more real somehow. And when I look back on it now, it doesn't fade like a dream. If anything, it gets clearer." "That's what my mother said too," Mrs. Wilson remarked. "She said it was more real than real. None of us really understood what she meant until now." Before she left, Mrs. Wilson hugged me, a fierce embrace that pulled at my healing wounds. I didn't mind the pain. "You've given me the greatest gift possible," she said. "The knowledge that my son isn't gone, just somewhere else for now." that he's at peace. I can go on living with that. After she left, I sat in the meeting room for a long time, processing what had happened. It had gone better than I could have hoped. Not only had she believed me, but she'd had context for understanding my experience because of her mother's similar journey. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt certain that the message I'd been sent back to deliver wasn't just a hallucination or a dream. It was real and it mattered. Over the next 2 months, my recovery continued. There were setbacks, an infection that required another surgery, complications with the healing of my lung tissue, persistent pain that kept me awake at night. But overall, I was making progress. By early August, the doctors deemed me stable enough for transfer to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Before I left Landstuhl, Chaplain Lewis gave me a parting gift, a small journal with a leather cover. For when the current one is full, he said, keep writing, keep processing. Your experience isn't just for you. It's meant to be shared. I will. I promised. And thank you for believing me, for helping me understand. I believe in the power of these experiences to transform lives, he replied. Whether they're glimpses of heaven or the natural process of consciousness separating from the body or something else entirely, they matter. They change people, always for the better. The flight to the United States was long and uncomfortable, despite the medical accommodations. By the time I arrived at Walter Reed, I was exhausted and in pain. But as they wheeled me into the hospital, a familiar face was waiting. Rodriguez. Sarge, he exclaimed, coming to walk alongside my gurney. He was in uniform, his new silver star gleaming on his chest. Damn, it's good to see you. Rodriguez? Ha ha. What are you doing here? I thought you were still in country. Got a week's leave to testify at a hearing on Capitol Hill. Figured I'd time it to be here when you arrived. He grinned. The whole squad's been keeping tabs on you. Jensen and Williams want to visit once they're back stateside. It was strange seeing him here, in this context. The last time I'd seen him had been during the firefight, his face streaked with dirt and sweat as he called out a warning. Now he looked crisp and professional in his service uniform, though there was a new hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Once I was settled in my room, Rodriguez pulled up a chair. Level with me, Sarge, he said, his expression serious. How are you really doing? Campbell told me about your experience. Physically, I'm getting there, I said. Won't be running marathons anytime soon, but the doctors think I'll make a decent recovery. As for the other thing, I took a deep breath. Yeah, that happened. And it's changed everything. Everything how? I considered how to explain. Remember that night you asked me if I was afraid to die? He nodded. It had been about a month before the ambush, during a particularly heavy period of fighting in our area. I told you I was more afraid of letting you guys down than of dying itself. And that was true. But now I'm not afraid of either. Death isn't what we think it is, Rodriguez. It's not the end. It's a transition. He studied me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. That kind of talk would get you a psych eval back in the unit. Probably, I admitted with a slight smile. But it's true all the same. I saw Martinez and Wilson, Rodriguez. They're okay. They don't blame us for what happened. His face tightened with emotion. You really believe that? That you actually saw them? I know I did. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was real. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then he said, I want to believe you, Sarge. I do, but it's hard. From where I was, all I saw was you getting shot trying to reach Wilson. Both of you lying there not moving. Then the medevac coming in hot, the pararescue guys working on you. One minute they were saying you were gone. The next they were shouting that they had a pulse. It was chaos. I understand the skepticism, I said. If our positions were reversed, I'd probably feel the same way. All I can tell you is what I experienced. What was it like? He asked, his voice softer now. The dying part, I mean. So I told him about the darkness, then the light. The overwhelming peace and love, meeting our fallen comrades, the presence that spoke to me, the message I was given. When I finished, Rodriguez sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. That's not what I expected. I always figured if there was anything after death, it'd be more like church. You know, God on a throne, angels with trumpets, all that. I laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at my healing chest. Yeah, it wasn't like that at all. No judgment, no hellfire. Just acceptance, understanding, love. And this presence, it told you to come back? To deliver a message? I nodded. To bear witness. To tell what I'd seen. to remind people what truly matters. Which is what? What truly matters. Love, I said simply. How we've loved and allowed ourselves to be loved. Everything else, power, possessions, even principles, it's all secondary. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. That's not exactly the warrior ethos they teach us in basic. No, I agreed. It's not, but I think it's the truth all the same. We talked a while longer about the unit, about what had happened after I was evacuated, about his plans for the future. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. Sarge, I'm glad you came back. And for what it's worth, I hope you're right. About Martinez and Wilson, about all of it. So do I, Rodriguez. So do I. The next few months at Walter Reed passed in a blur of surgeries, physical therapy, and psychological evaluations. The physical recovery was painful but straightforward. My body slowly healing, my strength gradually returning. The psychological side was more complicated. The military doctors were concerned about my near-death experience. Not because they thought it wasn't real, but because they worried about its impact on my mental health, my ability to return to duty if cleared physically. They used terms like post-traumatic spirituality and dissociative experiences. I did my best to navigate their concerns, to frame my experience in ways they could accept. Yes, I understood it might have neurological explanations. No, I wasn't having delusions or hallucinations now. Yes, I could distinguish between my experience and consensus reality. But in private, with the other wounded warriors in the hospital, I was more open. Many of them had had their own brushes with death, their own moments of staring into the abyss. Some had experienced phenomena they couldn't explain. A deceased grandfather appearing at the moment of injury, a voice guiding them to safety when all seemed lost, a profound sense of peace descending in the midst of chaos. They were hungry for what I had seen, what I had learned. In the long hours of the night, when pain kept us awake and the hospital halls were quiet, we would talk. I would tell them about the light, about the peace, about meeting our fallen comrades, about the message I had been given. Bear witness. Remember, love. One night, as I sat with a young Marine who had lost both legs to an IED, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you think it matters how you die? Like if you die fighting for something you believe in versus just getting hit by a car back home, does that make a difference on the other side? I considered this. Based on what I experienced. No, I don't think it matters how you die. What matters is how you've lived. Whether you've loved, whether you've allowed yourself to be loved. So all this, he gestured at his missing legs, all the sacrifice, all the pain, it doesn't make a difference? I didn't say that, I clarified. It makes a difference here in this life. It matters to the people you protected, the brothers you fought beside. It just doesn't seem to be the yardstick by which things are measured. After, he was quiet for a long time, then said, that's both comforting and terrifying, you know that? I knew exactly what he meant. As winter gave way to spring, my physical recovery reached a plateau. I had regained about 80% of my former strength and endurance. Not enough to return to combat duty, but enough to live a normal life. The damage to my lung tissue was permanent, leaving me with reduced capacity and susceptibility to infections. I would always have pain, always have limitations. The Army began processing my medical retirement. After 12 years of service, my career was over. I had mixed feelings about this. Part of me had always assumed I'd be a lifer, serving 20 years or more. But another part of me, the part that had seen the other side, knew that there were different ways to serve, different paths to follow. In March, I received another visitor, an older man in civilian clothes who introduced himself as Dr. Samuel Reynolds from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. We research phenomena that challenge mainstream paradigms of consciousness. He explained, near-death experiences are one of our primary areas of study. When we heard about your case through one of our contacts at Walter Reed, we were very interested in speaking with you. At first, I was hesitant. I'd grown tired of being treated like a research subject, of having my experience dissected and analyzed. I'm not looking to be studied, I told him frankly. Understood, he replied. I'm not here to study you, but to invite you to contribute to our understanding. We're collecting accounts from people like yourself who have had profound NDEs, particularly those that include veridical perceptions, instances where you observe things that your physical body and senses shouldn't have been able to perceive. This caught my interest. Like what? Like conversations between medical personnel while you were clinically dead, details about the resuscitation attempt, information about events occurring elsewhere while you were unconscious. I thought about it. During my NDE, I'd been focused on the light, on Martinez and Wilson, on the presence. I hadn't been paying attention to what was happening around my physical body. I don't think I have anything like that to offer, I admitted. That's perfectly fine. Dr. Reynolds assured me. Any detailed account helps us build our database, helps us understand patterns and variations in these experiences. And frankly, military NDEs are underrepresented in our research. Service members often don't report these experiences for fear of facing stigma or psychiatric evaluation. We talked for over an hour. Dr. Reynolds didn't try to explain away my experience or fit it into any particular theory. He simply listened, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. His respect for what I had experienced was evident. At the end of our conversation, he left me his card. If you ever want to talk more about your experience, or if you remember additional details, please contact me. And consider this. Many NDEers find that sharing their story with others who have had similar experiences can be tremendously healing. After he left, I thought about what he'd said. I had been sharing my experience with the wounded warriors at Walter Reed, but always informally, always in the quiet moments between medical procedures and therapy sessions. Perhaps there was a more structured way to bear witness, to deliver the message I'd been given. In April, I received my medical retirement from the Army. Staff Sergeant James Mercer became Mr. James Mercer, civilian. It was a strange transition, turning in my uniforms, saying goodbye to the life I'd known for 12 years. But it also felt right, like a natural progression rather than an ending. The first month of civilian life was an adjustment. I moved back to Kentucky, to the small town where I'd grown up. My parents were still there, still living in the same house where I'd been raised. They welcomed me home with open arms, converting the downstairs den into a bedroom so I wouldn't have to navigate the stairs with my still healing body. My father, the Vietnam veteran, didn't ask much about Afghanistan or my injuries. But one evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he surprised me. "Your mother told me about your experience," he said, his voice gruff. "About what happened when you were gone." I tensed, expecting skepticism or dismissal. My father had always been a practical man, not given to spiritual talk. "I never told anyone this," he continued, "not even your mother. But in '69, outside of Hugh, I took some shrapnel from a grenade, bled out before the medics could get to me. They brought me back, obviously, but for a few minutes there, I was gone." I stared at him, stunned. "You had an NDE? Why didn't you ever say anything?" He shrugged, his eyes still on the sunset. "It was different back then. You didn't talk about that kind of thing, especially not in the military. They'd have thought I was crazy or shell-shocked, so I kept it to myself." "What did you experience?" I asked, afraid to hear the answer in case it contradicted my own. "A light," he said simply. "The most beautiful light you can imagine. And peace. After months in that jungle hell, feeling peace like that, it was something else." "Did you see anyone? Anyone who had died?" He nodded. "My buddy Johnson. He'd been killed a week earlier. He was there, whole and healthy, telling me it wasn't my time yet." My father turned to look at me directly. "Sound familiar?" "Very," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "Dad, why are you telling me this now?" "Because you need to know you're not crazy. What you experienced was real. And because I think maybe it's time these things were talked about more openly." He reached over and patted my knee awkwardly. "Your generation is better at that than mine was." This conversation was a turning point for me. If my practical stoic father could accept the reality of NDEs based on his own experience, perhaps others could too. Perhaps bearing witness didn't have to be limited to private conversations in hospital rooms at night. I began researching near-death experiences more systematically, reading books and scientific papers, watching documentaries. I connected with organizations that studied NDEs, like the one Dr. Reynolds had mentioned. I joined online forums where experiencers shared their stories and supported each other. The more I learned, the more I realized how common these experiences were. Millions of people around the world had reported NDEs with similar elements: the tunnel, the light, the life review, meeting deceased loved ones, encountering a presence of profound love and wisdom. The experiences crossed cultural, religious, and geographical boundaries. Yet despite their prevalence, there was still significant stigma attached to talking about them. Many experiencers, especially in fields like the military, medicine, or law enforcement, kept their experiences secret for fear of being labeled unstable or unfit for duty. In June, at the suggestion of one of the NDE researchers I'd been in contact with, I attended a conference for near-death experiencers in Chicago. It was the first time I'd been in a room full of people who had been through something similar to what I had. The diversity of the group struck me immediately. There were people of all ages, backgrounds, professions, and belief systems. What united us was this profound experience that had changed our lives, often in similar ways. Many reported the same shifts in values and priorities that I had experienced. A decreased fear of death, increased compassion, less interest in material possessions and status, more interest in helping others and expanding consciousness. Many described struggling to integrate their experience into their daily lives, to reconcile what they had learned with the values and structures of modern society. During one session, a woman who had died during childbirth shared her experience of meeting her grandfather in the light. "He told me it wasn't my time, that my baby needed me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "When I came back, I was able to tell my mother things about my grandfather that there's no way I could have known. Personal things he'd never shared with anyone but her." This sparked a discussion about veridical perceptions, cases where experiencers gained information during their NDE that they couldn't have known through normal means. A man who had coded during heart surgery described accurately overhearing conversations between doctors in another room. A woman who had drowned described watching rescuers searching for her body from a vantage point above the lake. These accounts fascinated me. While I hadn't had this type of experience myself, they added to the growing body of evidence that NDEs weren't simply hallucinations or the results of a dying brain. On the last day of the conference, I was approached by one of the organizers, a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who had herself had an NDE during cancer surgery. "James," she said, "I've been listening to you speak in the breakout sessions. You have a powerful story and a clear way of communicating it. Have you ever considered speaking publicly about your experience?" "Like to groups?" I asked, surprised. "Yes. We have a speakers bureau of experiencers who share their stories at hospitals, universities, community centers, sometimes even churches or military bases. It's a way of raising awareness, reducing stigma, and offering comfort to those who have had similar experiences but are afraid to talk about them." The idea both excited and terrified me. Public speaking had never been my strength, but then I remembered the message I'd been given in the light: bear witness. "I'd like to try," I said. "I'm not sure I'd be any good at it, but I'd like to try." "Dr." Chen smiled. "None of us were professional speakers before this. What matters is the authenticity, the willingness to be vulnerable and share something profound. We can help with the rest. Presentation skills, handling questions, that sort of thing." Over the next few months, I began speaking to small groups about my near-death experience. At first, it was terrifying. Standing in front of strangers, sharing something so personal, so difficult to put into words. But gradually, I became more comfortable, more confident. I started with local veterans groups, where I had an instant connection with the audience. Then expanded to hospital staff trainings, university psychology classes, community education programs. I didn't charge for these talks. My military pension and disability payments covered my basic needs, and this didn't feel like something I should profit from. The responses were varied. Some people were clearly skeptical, viewing my experience through a purely materialist lens. Others were uncomfortable with the spiritual implications, especially when they didn't align with their religious beliefs. But many were deeply moved, finding hope and comfort in the message that death might not be the end, that love might indeed be the ultimate reality. After one talk at a hospice center, a nurse approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I've been working with dying patients for 20 years. So many of them describe seeing deceased loved ones in their final days, experiencing peace and acceptance even in the midst of physical suffering. The medical establishment dismisses these as hallucinations or the effects of medication. But I've always suspected there was more to it. Your story confirms what I've witnessed countless times. These moments of connection, of shared understanding, made all the discomfort of public speaking worthwhile. I was bearing witness, just as I had been instructed to do. As my speaking engagements increased, I began to connect with other veterans who had had NDEs during combat. Their stories were remarkably similar to mine, regardless of when or where they had served. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The same light, the same peace, the same message of love's primacy. One Vietnam veteran, who had died after stepping on a landmine in 1968, put it particularly well. "I went from hell to heaven in an instant, from the worst humanity is capable of to the best of what awaits us. And then I had to come back and live with both knowledges." This resonated deeply with me. The contrast between the violence and chaos of combat and the peace and love of the near-death experience was jarring. Living with both realities, integrating them into a coherent worldview, was an ongoing challenge. In the fall, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Reynolds at the University of Virginia. He had heard through the NDE research community that I was speaking publicly about my experience and wondered if I would be willing to participate in a study they were conducting on combat-related NDEs. We're particularly interested in how these experiences affect veterans' subsequent views on warfare, violence, and military service. He wrote, "Many report significant shifts in perspective, while still honoring their service and sacrifices." I agreed to participate. The study involved extensive interviews, psychological assessments, and brain scans. It was fascinating to be on the other side of the research, to see how seriously these scientists took experiences that many dismissed as hallucinations or wishful thinking. During one interview session, Dr. Reynolds asked me, "Has your near-death experience changed how you feel about your military service? About war in general?" I considered the question carefully. "It hasn't made me regret my service. I still believe in protecting the vulnerable, in standing up against oppression. But it has changed how I see the enemy. In the light, there's no us versus them. We're all part of the same whole, all equally valuable and loved." "And violence?" he pressed. "How do you reconcile what you experienced with your training as a soldier?" "That's harder," I admitted. "I've come to believe that violence, even when necessary to protect others, creates wounds that extend beyond the physical, wounds in the fabric of our shared humanity. I don't think the presence I encountered would condemn those who use force to protect the innocent, but I think it grieves the necessity." These conversations forced me to clarify my own thinking, to wrestle with the implications of what I had experienced. I didn't have all the answers, and I became more comfortable saying so in my talks. The mystery was part of the message. As the one-year anniversary of the ambush approached, I received a call from Rodriguez. He was still in the Army, now a staff sergeant himself, training new recruits at Fort Benning. "A bunch of us are getting together on the anniversary," he said. "Campbell, Jensen, Williams. We're meeting at Arlington to visit Martinez and Wilson, then going somewhere to remember them properly. We'd like you to join us." I hesitated. I hadn't been back to the East Coast since leaving Walter Reed. The idea of facing Arlington, with its endless rows of white headstones, was daunting. But these were my men, my brothers. "I'll be there," I said. April 15th dawned clear and cool in Washington, D.C., much like that fateful day in Afghanistan a year earlier. I met the others at the cemetery entrance. Rodriguez, Campbell with his cane, Jensen with the scars still visible on his face, Williams looking thin but healthy. We embraced without words, then made our way to the section where Martinez and Wilson were buried. The simple white headstones bore their names, ranks, dates of birth and death, and decorations. So little to show for lives that had meant so much to us. We stood in silence for a long time. Then Campbell produced a bottle of whiskey and small paper cups. I figured they'd want us to toast them properly. He said, pouring a measure into each cup and an extra one that he placed between the graves. "To Martinez," Rodriguez said, raising his cup. "The best damn spotter a team could ask for." "To Wilson," Jensen added, "who had the heart of a lion in the body of a bookworm." "To absent friends," I concluded, "never forgotten, always honored." We drank, the whiskey burning a path to our stomachs and bringing back memories of nights around campfires in Afghanistan, sharing bottles smuggled in care packages from home. As we stood there, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I could almost feel Martinez and Wilson with us, not in the graves beneath the white stones, but around us, among us, part of a reality just beyond our normal perception. Later, at a quiet bar near the cemetery, we shared stories and memories, laughter mixing with tears as we honored our fallen brothers. The others asked about my recovery, my new civilian life, my speaking engagements. "So you really believe it?" Williams asked after I'd explained what I now did. "That you saw Martinez and Wilson after you died? That there's something after this?" "I do," I said simply. "I can't prove it to anyone else, but I know what I experienced." "And they were okay?" Campbell asked, his voice rough with emotion. "They were at peace?" "More than okay," I assured him. "They were whole, complete, free from pain and fear. And they don't blame us for what happened. They understand in a way we can't from this side." "I want to believe that," Jensen said quietly. "Every night I pray for them, hope they're in heaven. But sometimes I wonder if it's just what we tell ourselves to make the loss bearable." "I wondered that too," I admitted. Whether my experience was just my brain's way of protecting me from the trauma of dying, but the more I've learned, the more people I've spoken with who have had similar experiences, the more convinced I've become that it was real. That what we call death is just a transition to another state of being. Rodriguez, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. You know what's funny? After you told me about your experience last year, I was skeptical. Thought maybe the trauma, the blood loss, something had messed with your perception. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've come to hope you're right. Hope? Yeah, hope. Because if Martinez and Wilson are still out there somewhere, whole and at peace, then maybe this whole thing makes sense after all. Maybe it's not just random violence and loss. Maybe there's a pattern we can't see from here. I thought about the presence I had encountered, about the sense of a greater pattern or purpose underlying everything. I think there is. I think everything matters, every choice, every moment of love or kindness. I think it all feeds into something larger than we can comprehend from this side. We talk late into the night, moving from philosophy to memories to plans for the future. Campbell was going to college on the GI Bill, studying physical therapy so he could help other wounded vets. Jensen had re-enlisted, determined to finish what we had started in Afghanistan. Williams was engaged to his high school sweetheart, starting a family. Rodriguez was finding purpose in training the next generation of soldiers. And I was bearing witness, remembering love, sharing the message I had been given. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, not the path I would have chosen, but it felt right, felt purposeful in a way my life before the ambush never had. As we parted ways that night, Rodriguez pulled me aside. That message you were given, he said, about bearing witness, about love being what matters. I think you're doing it right, Sarge. I think Martinez and Wilson would be proud. Coming from Rodriguez, the consummate professional soldier, this meant more than all the positive feedback from my talks combined. Thanks, Rodriguez, I said, my throat tight. That means a lot. He nodded, then added, and if you see them again, whenever your time really comes, tell them we miss them. Tell them we're trying to live in a way that honors what they gave. I will. I promised, but I have a feeling they already know. As I walked back to my hotel that night, I looked up at the stars visible even through the city lights. I thought about the journey I'd been on since that day in Afghanistan. From soldier to casualty, to experiencer, to witness. It hadn't been easy. There had been pain, doubt, loss, grief. There would be more challenges ahead, more questions without easy answers. But there had also been beauty, connection, growth, purpose. And underlying it all, the certainty I had brought back from the light, that love is what matters, that death is not the end, that we are all part of something greater than ourselves. Bear witness, remember love. I was doing my best to fulfill that mission, to share what I had learned on the other side of death. Not everyone would believe me. Not everyone would understand. But for those who needed to hear the message, those facing their own mortality, grieving loved ones, questioning the purpose of existence, I would continue to speak my truth. The dust of Afghanistan still returns sometimes in my dreams. I still taste it, feel it gritty on my skin. But now it's just a memory, not a nightmare. Because I know what lies beyond the dust, beyond the pain, beyond the final heartbeat. Light, peace, love, and the knowledge that we are never truly alone, never truly lost, never truly gone. I died in a Taliban firefight in Afghanistan, and I came back with a message.